Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to the first day of 2 weeks of Thomas Hardy. Today I'm going to be talking about my least favourite Hardy novel, The Well-Beloved. Chapter 1. A supposititious presentment of her. A person who differed from the local wayfarers was climbing the steep road which leads through the sea-skirted townlet definable as the Street of Wells, and forms a pass into that Gibraltar of Wessex, the singular peninsula once an island and still called such, that stretches out like a head of a bird into the English Channel. The Well-Beloved was published in 1892, and it is my least favourite Hardy novel, probably by quite a long way. I hope you will excuse the Kindle. I don't own many physical copies of Hardy, or at least I don't have them here. I read most of my Hardy books either on Kindle or on my mum's old 1970s classics editions, and I don't actually own that many physical Hardy books, which is a shame, and I should try and rectify that, but maybe when I have more shelf space than what I currently have now. So The Well-Beloved, or The Well-Beloved maybe, I'm not really sure, is an interesting Hardy novel. Not my favourite by quite a long way, as I say, but I do think there are some things in there that are really interesting. It follows a character called Jocelyn, who is a sculptor, and the book focuses on him at 3 different stages of his life. At the beginning of the book he's 20, in the middle of the book he's 40, and at the end of the book he's 60. And we meet him at these 3 important crossroads in his life, discovering more about him as a character, his relationship with women, and his relationship with the place that he grew up. And the basic premise of The Well-Beloved is to do with Jocelyn's idea of the well-beloved. He has this idea that when he loves various different women over the course of his life, he's actually loving the same thing in all of these women, and effectively for him he imagines this kind of spirit, this essence of the well-beloved, this essence of his ideal woman kind of moving between various different women who he meets over the course of his life, and he basically chases this essence of his ideal woman through different women in different generations of the same family. The main thing I love about this book is the setting. As you may be able to tell from the first sentence of The Well-Beloved, a lot of the book is set on this island which is, as Hardy calls it, the Gibraltar of Wessex. It is a peninsula, a island to a certain extent, off the coast of Wessex. It's one of those places that when the tide is out you can walk to, but when the tide is in is an island. And I find that setting fascinating. A lot of people talk about loving landscape in Hardy's books, and while I do enjoy his writing about nature and landscapes, I've never been one especially for physical descriptions, and I'm much more interested in general in how landscape affects people rather than landscape for landscape's sake. But I do think that in The Well-Beloved, the setting of this island is so interesting and so beautifully described, but also fascinating in terms of the impact it has on the people who live on this island. Jocelyn at the beginning of the book is coming back from London after a while away, but he returns to this island that he kind of has a love-hate relationship with. This island is his home, he grew up there, but he also finds it slightly uncultured after London, and he finds it quite insular and weird. Because this place is physically as well as culturally cut off from the rest of England, it is in some ways a little bit backward. It has a lot of traditions that the rest of England no longer share, and it's also very insular and in a kind of way incestuous, like everyone seems to be related to each other in some distant way because there aren't that many people on the island, and I love that setting and I think that is done really well. I also think the idea of the well-beloved is quite interesting. The central premise of the well-beloved is not something that makes the book enjoyable or pleasant to me. In some places it makes the book quite creepy, and in some places it makes the book very dismissive of women, something that in general I don't find of Hardy. I think that in general he writes about women and the position of women in Victorian society very well. A lot of his books have a central female protagonist, and I enjoy that, and I think in general he does it very well. But I think the way that women are presented, or at least the way that Jocelyn views women in The Well-Beloved, makes it difficult for me to read. But the idea of The Well-Beloved, of having this kind of essence of the ideal woman that he's chasing through different women, is quite interesting. And the way that that changes with Jocelyn over time, or the way that it often doesn't change with Jocelyn over time, the way that to an extent he is the same person at 60 as he was at 20, the way that he never really grows up. I think those things about the book are really interesting and well done. I think that Jocelyn as a character, however much I don't like him, is well explored and is an interesting character, and the way that he uses this idea of the well-beloved and the idea that this essence of the ideal woman is moving from one woman to another to justify the way he treats women and to justify his quick transference of love from one person to another, although not pleasant, it's really quite interesting. And as well, Thomas Hardy's writing is always very good and very enjoyable. But the things I don't like about The Well-Beloved, as I've already said, is partly to do with the central premise, this idea of the well-beloved. The book is creepy. There's no other way for me to say why I didn't like The Well-Beloved. It's just a bit creepy. The first third of the book I enjoyed, and then the second third is a bit creepy, and then the third It's so creepy. You're like, Hardy, no. Hardy, this isn't okay. Don't do this, Hardy. What are you doing? I also found the actual ending, like the final bit of the third, a bit weird as well. Like, I didn't really know why Hardy did what he did. I do find that Hardy's endings can be a bit mixed. Like, he has some perfect, beautiful, earth-shattering endings, and then some endings where you're like, really, Hardy? What are you doing there? And that's kind of how I felt about the ending of The Well-Beloved, and to be honest, how I felt about quite a lot of The Well-Beloved. I find the character of Jocelyn really hard to like, and not as interesting as the women in the book, but the women, because you only really see them through Jocelyn's perspective, you never really get to see them properly. Like, the important female character in the second third of the book I find really interesting, and I find the choices she makes and the way she acts very interesting, but we never quite get to see a full sense of her that is beyond Jocelyn's idea of the well-beloved and her embodying that ideal of womanhood. So I feel like some of the things that I could find more interesting in the well-beloved are lost a bit in the fact that I don't like Jocelyn and his idea of the well-beloved taking slightly creepy turns at various points in the book. The Well-Beloved is, I think, one of Thomas Hardy's shortest novels, but I wouldn't recommend starting with it at all. It is a very bad place to start with Hardy because it will give you the wrong impression of what most of his books are like, and it is a little bit weird. But I think if you've read quite a lot of Hardy novels, if you've read 5 or 6, it is worth the read. It's an interesting book despite the creepiness, and I do love the island setting, and I think that is a really fascinating aspect of this book that I kind of wish was in another book with a different story in it, but regardless, I do think it's still an interesting book to read. And that is basically all I have to say about The Well-Beloved. I will have more and better things to say in tomorrow's video. I'm going to be talking about my second to least favourite Thomas Hardy novel, and throughout the next fortnight I will be getting more and more positive as we go on to my favourite Hardy books. I hope you have enjoyed the first day of 2 weeks of Thomas Hardy, and I'll be back tomorrow talking about another Hardy book.